welcome to the Speaking Spirit podcast. I am your host, Daisy Farrell, and I am a psychic medium, healer, artist, and teacher based in the Hudson Valley, New York, and I'm so excited to be here with you today. Thank you, first off, for just tuning in and listening, and this is very exciting. It's my first episode, and I can't even tell you how long I have wanted to do this. I think it's been several years that this idea has been kind of on the back burner and has been discussed. I've had many people bring up that I should have a podcast many times, and I was always like, I really want to. So I am so excited to finally be doing this and starting. So this podcast is going to be super open and explorative on so many different topics. We're going to cover mediumship, psychic development, spirituality, recovery, addiction recovery. I'm going to have so many different fun guests on here where we can have really interesting, thought-provoking conversations. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm just so excited to have you along the ride with me. And so for the first episode, I thought just to kind of get a baseline here, I would share my personal story. So that's something that's been coming up a lot recently for me. I actually just recently shared basically a mini biography on my Instagram through images and writing. So I figured it's good to just kind of have your story in many different forms for people to access and experience and, get a hold of. So I thought it'd be really helpful to have an audio version of my story available for people. And my main reason for sharing my story today is to help someone else. And, I think about early on in my journey, I felt very isolated and I felt like no one really understood what I was going through. And at that time, I was obsessively listening to other podcasts that contained mediums' personal stories of development. I was reading books about different mediums just in hopes that there was something I could relate to that would help me kind of get through the period that I was feeling stuck in. So I just think that this content is good to have out there. I don't think there's nearly enough. So hopefully this is one other story that can be there to hopefully show people that they're not alone and that you can get through it. You can get through anything. And not only that, it can be absolutely amazing and it can change your life. So without further ado, let's dive right in. So my story is very long. So for your own sanity and mine, I'm going to truncate it as best as I can. Really, my goal is to write a book one day. And that's probably the best format for my story because it is so long. But I'm just going to go over really the key points to me that I think are worth sharing and all tie together into what led me to where I am today. So I am an only child, and I had a really decent childhood. I really can't complain there too much. The main thing, though, is that I was super weird from the beginning, very weird and creative, and really in my own world, pretty much from the beginning. And, the thing that's interesting, too, is I am what you call a latent medium. And that situation is basically where I came into my mediumship later in life. Now, there are some people that from day one, they know they're a medium, they're seeing dead people in their room or whatever, right? And they just know that. Now, for me, I didn't have that experience exactly. However, after figuring out that I was a medium, I was able to look back at my childhood and different experiences and be like, oh, that makes sense now, right? So I do believe that I was born with these abilities. And the one thing that I will share is that it is on both sides of my family. On my mother's side, my great-grandmother, who had immigrated from Serbia, was an unbelievable psychic. And my family early on would tell all these stories about her abilities and the things that she experienced. And that really, made this openness in my family and growing up around the paranormal and psychics. So it was not something that was shied away from or not discussed or feared, really, which I'm very grateful for. And then on my dad's side, my grandmother was also very psychic and intuitive, and she more so had a lot of intuitive abilities within her dreams, which I feel was carried on to me. And she was also an artist and was somebody that created her art really inspired by those dreams and intuitive things that came in and so forth. So I really had it on both sides, and I feel that, part of it is definitely genetic in that way. So early on, my first indication of my intuitive abilities were really my dreams. And from day one, I have always had insanely vivid dreams that are just over the top, and I would always remember them in great detail, and they were just a lot. And it's just something that's normal for me. But that was really my first tool psychically. Growing up in grade school and so forth, I definitely struggled a lot socially. I just think that kids didn't really understand me. Like I said, I was very weird and creative, and I don't know, I just was kind of in my own world, but I was very okay with it. But I did bounce around schools quite a bit when I was younger. And I went to a couple private schools, again, just to kind of give me some more attention academically. I struggled a lot with daydreaming, and I had a hard time focusing and all of that. So that was part of it as well. And during that time, I had my first premonition dream. So this dream was about a friend of mine from my childhood who went to school with me. And when I had the dream, I think I was about 10 years old. And I had no idea that it was a premonition dream. I just thought it was a weird dream that I had about my friend. And I told him about it the next day and just moved on. Didn't think anything of it, right? And it was about 6 years, I think 6 years later, the dream came true. Now, when that happened, I just didn't really think anything of it. I thought, wow, that's really strange, but I don't know, whatever. And I just kind of moved on. I was a teenager at the time, and I was really focused on other things. So I just didn't really put much attention on it. Going through my teens was really hard. I was hospitalized at 13 for depression, and was put on antidepressants at that time and diagnosed with major depressive disorder. And, I think that's a big theme in my story. And it's around this idea where I started to just believe that there was something wrong with me. And that started pretty early on. And because I was different and unique and did my own thing and did it without really any apologies, kids didn't get it, and kids started to question that, right? And when you're a kid, then you start to think, maybe I'm missing something here. I feel like I'm being really authentic to myself, but it doesn't seem like other people agree here. So I started to really question myself at that age, which I'm sure, so many people do. But I really kind of dove into that narrative and started to really believe it. So going into high school, that narrative just continued and strengthened for me. And that was really when I began experimenting with substances. And I wasn't really into alcohol at that time. I more was into weed and different drugs. But substance abuse and alcoholism is a huge part of my story as well, and something that I think is really important to share. And it's something that also ran in my family, and I feel is absolutely genetic in some ways. So that is another thing that I also feel that I was born with, and is, like I said, a big part of my story too. Throughout high school, I definitely dealt with a lot of bullying and really challenging situations socially, and the substances definitely didn't help with that. I thought they were helping, but they didn't really help, right? And I just kind of got through it. I was in a relationship starting around 16 that lasted until I was about 18, and it was a very unhealthy relationship as well for me. I also struggled a great deal with an eating disorder as well, which I also feel just falls under the same umbrella of my addictive behaviors. I lacked a lot of confidence, and I was very codependent. I had a lot of codependency behavior patterns at that time in my life. And, I think one of the biggest things for me too was that I just didn't really know how to trust myself. And I think that comes back to that original thing I was talking about, which is where people were questioning me when I was very young. And then it made me question me and not trust myself. And it made me believe that I didn't know what I was doing and that I didn't have a clear direction in my life, when really all along I did. But I just was believing these other opinions about me. Going into college, I decided to pursue art, and I went to art school in Baltimore. And it was a great school. It really was. I had originally went in for graphic design because I thought it would make my parents less anxious for a career, right? But I did eventually switch to drawing in my junior year. And I'm glad I did, because it just wasn't for me, right? I just like to create with my hands, and it just didn't feel right to be on a computer all the time. So college is really where things got their worst for me in my alcoholism. Really quickly, I started drinking, which I had mentioned before. I didn't really do much in high school. I did a little bit, but not a ton. It was just not my thing that much. But essentially, I just wanted to fit in. I wanted people to think I was cool. I wanted to be accepted, right? And so I forced myself to drink. But very quickly, because I'm an alcoholic, right, I became very comfortable with it. And I was a blackout drinker from day one. The other thing that really shows me that I was an alcoholic is that, I would be having these horrible blackouts pretty much all the time. And, normal people, typically when they have a blackout like that, right, they're like, oh my God, that was like terrifying. I never want to drink again, right? And they really take it easy, or they try to prevent that from happening again. Me, I didn't care. I was like, all right, well, I have my wallet, I have all my things. I'm not missing a limb, whatever, and I really didn't care. I had no fear around what I was doing to myself physically. I was definitely one of those people where I could never turn my mind off. I just couldn't. It was always going. I was always feeling something. I was always thinking about something. And alcohol was this magical solution that it was really the only thing I had ever found that completely shut that off. And it was really like a miracle to me at the time. I also felt that it made me more fun. It made me socially accepted. It did so many things for me that I felt I needed. And so throughout college, my alcoholism progressed very quickly and got really serious really fast. So I really mean it when I say I am very lucky to be alive. And that's actually one of the first ways that I was able to believe in a higher power, because I mean, there's no way I should have survived the things that I put myself through. So I know I was meant to be here, right? Something wanted me here. I just didn't know that at the time. But I was really treating my body like it was this outside entity that I wasn't even a part of, right? And it was just the thing I was just abusing. And I would just take any kind of drug anyone gave me. I had alcohol poisoning, countless times, and would put myself in all kinds of really scary situations. And a lot of terrible things happened to me throughout that time that was very traumatic. And it just made it all worse, right? I would just drink more over it. I dealt with a lot of difficult relationship situations as well, because again, one of the things that I did at that time was that I made other people my higher power, right? I would pick a person that I felt seemed very confident, very driven, and really knew what they wanted in life. And I'd be like, cool, they really know what they're doing. I'm just going to kind of be behind them and let them lead the way, because I don't feel confident. I don't know what I want, and I don't know what I'm doing. So that would get me in a lot of really difficult situations, as you can imagine. And I really wasn't able to speak my mind either. I really had a hard time with conflict. I avoided it at all costs. And I just wanted to kind of disappear, right? I didn't really know how to feel empowered in any way. So to get to the end here, I was a junior in college when I had this huge blackout and got caught by my RA. I didn't even know that it had happened until a month later when I got an email about it. And that had been my second alcohol strike with my school. So I had to speak with the dean. He had to tell my parents. It was a whole thing. I was put on academic probation, and I had to go to a program of some sort for them to allow me to come back to school. Now, I really feel this was the universe stepping in because I was the type of person where I was not going to ask for help. I thought I was totally fine. I had it together. I was definitely not, right? But I was lying to myself. I had straight A's in school at that time, and that was kind of my way of telling myself, it's not that bad. I'm fine. And it's not true, right? But the universe was definitely stepping in here because I don't think I would have survived had that not happened. So I was very resistant. I was very angry. But I never had a problem admitting I was an alcoholic. I had no issue with that. And often I would just say that I was to kind of be my excuse, right, for how I was behaving. But I told my parents everything, and I went home early. It was like in the spring. So it was a little bit before finals. And my dad took me to my first AA meeting. And this was because his brother had told him to do that. I was not excited about this at all, but I decided to go. And I remember going, and I had like my hoodie on, and I looked all angry. And I shared, and I was crying. I was a mess. And then everybody applauded for me and was so friendly. And I was like, this is really weird. I'm like, okay. I was not expecting that at all. But really, I was shocked. Everyone was so unbelievably warm and kind. And all these people just swooped in to help me. And it saved my life. It really did. So I did a 90 and 90, which is where you do 90 meetings in 90 days. And I got a sponsor and I started working the steps. But again, I was only 20 years old. So I was very young. And I also felt that I hadn't chosen to get clean, right? So I had this resentment and kind of this reservation around the fact that, that people this young shouldn't have to do all of this crazy, heavy, introspective work on themselves. And I'm too young for this. I was just like, this isn't fair. None of my friends are doing this kind of thing. And I just want to be normal. Like, I just want to be able to live my life and have fun. And I also didn't believe at all that I could have a fulfilling, enjoyable life without substances. I just did not buy it. I didn't buy it. So I did it, and it definitely helped me. But I still smoked weed a couple of times. But then I did celebrate 90 days. And my parents were hesitant about letting me go back to finish my degree, but I was hell-bent on finishing it. So I was like, I don't care. I'm going. So I went back, and really pretty quickly, I went right back to my old behaviors. My story is one of many relapses. And it's really due to, like I said, that resistance around being so young and it just not feeling fair to me. So I relapsed many times, and then I finally had what I consider my true bottom. And that was really during my last blackout, during senior year of college. I remember sitting outside and looking at all these stars, and I finally felt this connection to something greater than me. And I just said, okay, I get it. I give up. I understand that I'm not normal here. And I'm willing to try to change my life. So that is when I started working with a new sponsor, and I dove all the way in to the AA program. And the woman that sponsored me is so special to me. She was also at my school, actually, in the graduate program. And she is somebody that I credit to really saving my life. I worked the steps, I was doing my meetings, and it was pretty miraculous because I remember that was when I first really experienced the feeling of true sobriety. And it was something that crept up on me. But then I started to just notice this change in me that I couldn't even really put into words. And I was like, whoa, this feels amazing, but it also feels scary and weird and different, but I think I like it, right? And that was really also the moment that I started to understand that, hey, you know what? I actually can have an amazing life sober. And that was really one of the things that saved my life too. So by the end of that year, I I graduated, which was really exciting. And I was really excited to get out of there because, wow, that was a hell of a 4 years for me. And I moved back home for a little while and I did relapse again. Just goes to show, right? I mean, I'm very lucky because I was somebody that was able to really bounce back and return to the program after relapsing, which is not true for everyone. So I feel very grateful that that worked out that way for me. So my last drink was actually the day before my 22nd birthday. And, it wasn't any kind of crazy last drink. Some people have like really insane stories, right, for their last drink. It really wasn't. I didn't even get like that drunk, but I just decided that I was done. And I think that was the other thing was every time I relapsed, especially after I had done that step work with my sponsor in Baltimore, it just ruined it for me, right? When I went back to drinking, I just felt this deep knowing in my soul that I just couldn't do this anymore, right? And that it was wrong. And I just knew better. I knew too much to try to fool myself, right? And again, I think it's different for every person in recovery, right? And I don't think we can always say what it is that does it for us. But I'm lucky to say that that's what did it for me. I was just ready. So I just made that commitment on my 22nd birthday. I would be sober, and that was it. So not the best idea, but literally my first day sober, it was my birthday, and I flew to New Mexico to move there. I don't recommend doing that, but I was there to move in with my friend from college. And luckily, I immediately got hooked up with an amazing AA meeting in the area and got a sponsor right away. This is another woman that's a total angel in my life, and I feel I have such a deep soul connection to. And she really saved me during that period of time, and she carried me through. And I was there for about 3 months, and I had a falling out with my friend, did not work out, and I moved back home. It just wasn't working. It wasn't where I wanted to be. And during that summer as well, I had started dating my now husband, and he is also in the program. And his story ties into mine as well. We're definitely soulmates, and we're meant to teach each other a lot of things. But I moved back, and I moved in with him. And I ended up taking a job at a bakery. I got reconnected with a home group in the area, and I started working with a sponsor. And this was the official first time that I went through all 12 steps with someone and was fully committed. And it totally transformed my life. It really did. And I love AA, and I will always advocate for AA, share about AA. I love it so, so much, and I feel so grateful that I'm part of it. Because I see so many people that don't have something like that in their life, and I just kind of wish everybody could go, right? I just think it's the most amazing thing that I can go anywhere in the world and go to an AA meeting and feel like I'm surrounded by family. It's really, really cool. So that totally transformed me going through the steps, and it did a few key things that I'll share. Number one is that it got me connected with a higher power. And that was something that was really challenging for me because I really didn't grow up with a lot of spirituality or religion in my home. And I was always kind of, freaked out by the whole God thing. I didn't like praying. I just was not into it. It was something that I just didn't really think about much. I was so in my head and self-absorbed really with just my own alcoholic stuff. But one thing that I was able to do is I was able to look back at my childhood where I spent basically all my time in the woods. And that was really spiritual, right? So that's kind of what I started with. And then I was able to build from there. But I really started to feel connected to something. It took me a long time, but I started to create a ritual and a spiritual practice that worked for me. And again, I was never really big on prayer, but I really started to get into meditation, which again was something I hated at first. But over time, I grew to really enjoy it. And then one of the other main things that working the steps did for me was I was able to find out who I really was. I was able to understand myself at the most deep level in a way that I had never experienced before. And I had relationships that now aligned with that. It was the most amazing thing to have these relationships that were built sober, because it was genuine, right? They were relationships where I was connecting with people as myself, and I didn't need substances to enhance it or make a connection, which is what I did for a very long time. Substances were my identity. So I felt very confused socially for a long time and had a lot of social anxiety when I got sober. But it was amazing. And not only that, I was also able to find this confidence and leadership and this ability to vocalize and stand up for myself and be clear, set boundaries. I mean, all these things I realized had been traits of mine all along. I always was somebody that was bold and outspoken and could set boundaries with people. I was somebody that was able to make big decisions and feel, confident in where I was going in my life. I just had been telling myself these lies for so long and allowed other people to dictate that for me. So that completely transformed everything about my life and how I handled everything in my life. The other thing is that I was able to see all these things that I used to view as negative about myself, and I saw the beauty in them. I saw the strength in them. And all the things that I had gone through and all the things that I felt shame about, I was able to have compassion for. I was able to heal. There's endless things that I can share that, this program did for me, but it gave me a foundation for living that still carries me through to this day. So going into my second year sober, my husband was still struggling a lot with his sobriety. And we went through a year that was incredibly challenging during that time. And it taught me so many things. And I'm honestly really, really grateful for it. And it not only taught me a lot, it also taught both of us a lot. And it was able to strengthen our relationship and build our relationship in a way that I can't even fully put into words. But it gave us this ability to get through anything together. But during that time, it really challenged my sobriety and it challenged my belief in a higher power. That was the other thing. Because again, as a recovering codependent, I wanted to control the situation. I really did. And there was many moments where I was very tempted to do certain things to control the outcome, right? And I'm happy to say that I was able to use my program and trust in a higher power and trust that my husband had a higher power that had a plan for him. And I was not part of that. And my husband's another one of those examples of somebody that really should not be here and should not have survived what he went through. But he was clearly meant to stay. He's meant to be here for a very important reason. And I feel that as individuals and as a couple. And so I was able to take a step back. And it's amazing to me how things just unfolded for him. And he ended up going to a long-term rehab, which is exactly what he needed. And he miraculously has been sober ever since, which is just a literal miracle. I mean, both of us are miracles in that way. And it's something that I am grateful for every single day and never want to forget, right? I never want to forget where we came from and what we went through. It's such an important part of my story personally, and it's something that I'm really proud of, right? For both of us. So that whole situation was the number one thing in my early recovery that taught me faith. It taught me trusting the plan, even when it seems really bleak, right? It showed me that also I could get through anything sober. And that is going to be the end of part 1. I just realized this is going to be a 2-part thing. And thank you so, so much for listening and taking the time to hear my story. And I just hope that it resonated with you in some way. Of course, please feel free to reach out to me if it did, or if you have any questions. I always love to chat and talk to people. So You can find me at daisyfarrell.com. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook at Medium Daisy. But all of those links are also in the description of the episode, and I will see you for the next episode. Bye!